I don't think Kalen King should play cornerback anymore. If he wants a long future in the NFL, he should make the move to safety.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily Penn State Nittany Lions podcast. I'm your host, Zach Seyko, and we are a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's episode is brought to you by Nissan. If you're the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further, ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner, take the Nissan Rogue, the Nissan Pathfinder, or the Nissan Armada, and go find your next big adventure. Check them out all today at nissanusa.com. If you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams, and a little bit of a different venue, a different background. As you can see, Locked On Nittany Lions is mobile. If you're watching, if you're listening, yes, we are on the road. We are on vacation, but we're still bringing the podcasts and the content to you as Penn State does not rest, right? The NFL Combine wrapping up here, and I have some takeaways from this, including Kalen King should switch to safety, should move from quarterback to safety. I think whatever NFL GM and whatever team drafts him would be wise to do that. It's not that he can't play corner. I think that he's better suited for safety. Now, one of his former teammates disagrees with me. If you follow me on X, formerly known as Twitter, I posed this idea and it seemed to gain a little bit of traction. I'm not going to say, whoa, the post, it blew up, but it definitely got some. People agreed. People did agree that Kalen King might be better. Now, for different reasons. The 40 time of 4.61 was a little concerning, but that's not the only reason that I think that Kalen King should switch to safety. Jalen Reed, current Penn State safety on the team, criticized it, said that who's giving me this job, that I'm just saying whatever I want just to essentially get views, get clicks, what have you. But I genuinely think that Kalen King would be better suited as a safety in the NFL as opposed to a cornerback. 40 time factors into that. It does. But it's not the only thing, because there were plenty of I don't know what I said was wrong. I really don't know what I said that way, and that was critical. I said that he was better suited to play safety in the NFL because there were other people that said, well, Kalen King's too slow, so he doesn't belong in the league. Now, that's a lazy take. That's uninformed. But you watch over the course of the past season at Penn State, you combine that with some of the combine numbers, and then you just watch some of the drills, and it's like he looks like he can make that transition to safety as opposed to the boundary cornerback spot. So I felt like I felt like I was a little bit nicer, right? People criticize and went after Kalen King, saying that he tanked his draft stock and that he's no good and that he shouldn't be drafted at relatively high at all. Because at one point he was a top 15 NFL draft pick, or at least was projected to be a first rounder for sure. And now is he a day 2 pick? I think he's possibly moves into the conversation of a 4th round pick. That's probably it relates to Keely Ringo from Georgia, just the way the draft stock is going. Ringo was viewed as a 1st round pick, then day 2, and then ultimately ended up with the Eagles in the 4th round. And I kind of see that similarly here. But Jalen Reed, look, I like Jalen Reed. I think he's one of my breakout candidates for next season. Had a really good year this past season. Him and KJ Winston form a dynamic duo at that safety spot. But for Kalen King, he hasn't exactly lived up to the expectations here at the cornerback. And now we have a better idea that maybe he would be better suited at a safety spot. Because, okay, you have the 40 time, but he's fluid with his hips. He drops back into coverage very well. I've always thought that he was a better zone coverage corner or just a zone coverage defensive back than man-to-man. And this past season backs that up. The past season backs that up. I'll go through the PFF, Pro Football Focus, take with, I value it. I think it's another way to evaluate a football game and evaluate football players. But let's go through, because Kalen King should switch to safety based on what we've seen from a season ago. He was really good in 2022, but Joey Porter Jr. was handling a lot of the responsibility in that season. In 2023, when the responsibilities changed and Kalen King was asked to guard number 1 wide receivers, he could not do it at the same level. West Virginia, 60.2 coverage grade. Second worst overall and the worst among starters. That includes Jalen Reed, KJ Winston, and Johnny Dixon. That's an okay game. That's an okay game. Delaware, 62.7 coverage grade. That's an okay game. Again, middle of the pack, lowest among starters. Illinois, 58.5. Third lowest overall and the lowest among starters. These are Kalen King's PFF grades for the season for 2023. Iowa, middle of the pack in terms of the grades, 65.3, worst among starters. Northwestern, 61.2, middle of the pack overall, second worst among starters. Jalen Reed was the lowest in that game. Jalen Reed called out this point. Against UMass, best game of the year so far, really good game, 70.3 coverage rating. Middle of the pack overall, but the best among starters. So other backups had solid games, but they, down the depth chart, UMass doesn't have as much talent, and this is UMass. Then we get to the Ohio State game. Marvin Harrison Jr. made Kalen King look silly. Nobody could cover Marvin Harrison Jr., but Kalen King had a 43.4 coverage grade. That was the worst grade of the season and the worst overall for Penn State on that day. Against Indiana, middle of the pack again, 55.4, below okay game. Second worst among starters. KJ Winston did not have a good game. That was a bad game for Winston in coverage, in terms of coverage. Maryland, 53.7, second best among starters. Bad, really a below average game for everyone except KJ Winston that day. Michigan, 45 coverage grade, 45.0. Worst among everybody, and there were only 9 pass plays to show for it. So when Kalen King was asked to be in coverage, didn't really draw that great of a grade. Against Rutgers, 70.6. Funny enough, Pro Football Focus listed him as a strong safety in this game. So if you go back and watch the tape, Kalen King's even playing his normal position here, but 70.6 against Rutgers. Second best after that was KJ Winston. So he had a really good coverage game against Rutgers, but we know that they don't have this prolific passing attack. We know that about the Scarlet Knights. And against Michigan State, same thing. This was the best game of the season by far, 79.3, and it was still not the best on the team. It was third best. KJ Winston and Jalen Reed had better games that day. For the season, a 55.7 coverage grade, third worst on the team, and only 0.1 points better. 1/10 better than Tyrese Mills and Elliott Washington. Those are your grades for Kalen King in a 2023 season. At cornerback, mind you. When I bring up the debate of why he should not be a cornerback and be a safety in the NFL, you combine that with, I think he's better in zone coverage. I don't think he's as great in man-to-man coverage. And the Marvin Harrison Jr. tape film footage is kind of the indicator here. Marvin Harrison Jr. is a one-of-a-kind wide receiver, of course, right? And there's only maybe, one or two types of players like that in college football at the time. I guess Malik Neighbors would be the other one, right, for LSU, but just those kinds of types of players. I know there are other really good. I'm not trying to discredit the remainder of the wide receiver class, but in the NFL, my point is there are dozens of Marvin Harrison Jr. types of players. Who would Kalen King exactly be asked to cover? He can be a cornerback in the NFL, but I think he'd have a better long-term career as a safety. I think because he can make plays. He has good ball skills. He's instinctive. But he's not as good in man-to-man coverage as we thought he would be. Again, this was supposed to be a bona fide first-round pick. Switched to that number one corner position, and it didn't work out in 2023. I don't know. Maybe there's a lingering injury we don't know about. I can't speculate, but it is. I did not think that Kalen King would run a 4.6, but there's more to it. My take isn't just based on, well, he ran a slow 40 time. I run a 7.6 on a good day, right? It's slow compared to other NFL athletes here. So Kalen King should switch to safety because he has other good complementary skills that as a corner, he can play corner, but he's not going to be your number one. And I don't know if he's going to be your number two. You don't put him in the slot. So what? I want him to be a backup. I think he's going to be a backup where I think he could be a starting safety and be really effective at the next level. What I said wasn't wrong. What if and I'm not trying to, but what if I compared him to Ed Reed? This is kind of responding to Jalen Reed in this case. because I'm not just saying anything for attention here. I thought that, hey, based on this drill and what we've seen throughout the 2023 season, that Kalen King makes a little more sense at safety as opposed to cornerback. He can play cornerback in the NFL. I wouldn't start him. That's just the fact of the matter. I wouldn't start him. I think he could be a starting safety. I think he could be a good quality safety because of the other skills that he has. Doesn't mean he can't make plays at cornerback, but it also means that, I mean, hey, there's more coverage, man-to-man coverage involved. He'll fit in a good system. NFL GMs will know best where to put him, but in my opinion, safety seems like the best avenue for Kalen King in the NFL. Now, other Penn State players showed out. Again, at the time of this recording, the NFL Combine is still going on, so I haven't seen Olu Fashanu, Hunter Norzak, Caden Wallace go through the drills, but Theo Johnson, Chop Robinson, Daquan Hardy really should have boosted their draft stocks out of the NFL Combine, and we're going to discuss that on the other side of this break. Today's episode is brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. How about the Nissan Rogue, the 2024 Nissan Rogue? It's perfect for city drives and great escapes. Class exclusive, Google built in is your always updating assistant to call on for almost anything. Gone are the days of connecting your phone. Google Assistant, Google Maps, Google Play Store are built right into the 12.3-inch HD touchscreen infotainment system. The 2024 Rogue is the perfect midsize crossover for your next adventure. How about the 2024 Nissan Pathfinder? Has room for up to 8 people, an expansive cargo capacity, and advanced available 4x4 capabilities with 284 horsepower and up to 6,000 pounds of towing. When adventure calls, the Pathfinder is there for the answer. Take the Nissan Rogue, the Nissan Pathfinder, or the Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop right now at nissanusa.com. That is nissanusa.com. The Locked On Podcast Network is making history. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows covering each and every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube, and it's also now available in the free Fire TV channels app. Chop Robinson boosted his draft stock. Theo Johnson boosted his draft stock. Now, at the time of this recording, the NFL Combine's not over. The offensive linemen still have to go through their drills. Let me know in the comments what you thought about this. Where do you think Kalen King should be drafted? Theo Johnson, Chop Robinson? Because for Robinson and Johnson, Robinson was always a first-round pick in my mind, but for everybody else that thought he was a day 2 pick for whatever reason, those doubts, those assessments should be put to rest. Now Theo Johnson vaults himself into a first-round conversation as well. For Chop Robinson, why I always thought of him as a top 20 pick, because watching Penn State football every weekend certainly backs that up here. But Chop Robinson now at 6'3", 254 pounds, as somebody who is going to be used as a pure defensive end, just a pass rusher, disrupt the quarterback, get after the passer. He was the second fastest edge rusher, 254 pounds, coming after you at 4.48 speed, 1.4 10-yard splits. So he's the fastest in terms of the quickest when it comes to, coming off the football. First among edge rushers with a 1.54 10-yard split. 12th among edge rushers with his vertical, 34.5 inches. But remember, he is 6'4". He has no problem batting passes out of the air. And then the broad jump, number 1 among edge rushers as well, second among edge rushers in the 20-yard shuttle. NFL scouts, GMs know that Chop Robinson belongs as a first-round pick. Everybody else that had him as a day 2 might not watch enough Penn State football, and that's fine. Might not watch enough Big Ten football, as it be. Chop Robinson was never going to make it to the second round. He was always a first-round pick, and now the NFL Combine solidifies that. Number 1 pure athlete to go along with the talent, and whatever NFL team decides to draft him, as I thought he was the best edge rusher, one of the best edge rushers, definitely one or two. He's 1A or 1B, however you want to look at it, going into the draft. And now he has solidified that. For Theo Johnson, I guess he has a little bit more question marks because Chop Robinson has the, has the tape, has the film, has the stats to back up that. But Theo Johnson doesn't exactly. I think it's not a hot take to say that Theo Johnson is going to be looked at as a late first round, early second round pick. Oh, well, the stats don't back up Theo Johnson as a first round pick. Okay. He was in a crowded tight end room. He had to share snaps, targets, reps with Brenton Strange, who was a second round pick by the Jacksonville Jaguars a season ago. And then Tyler Warren, who some people tell me that Tyler Warren's better than Theo Johnson and Brenton Strange. Some people tell me that Tyler Warren's going to be a future first or second round pick in his own right, too. And he could have gone into the NFL draft this season, probably as a day 3 pick. I could have seen him as a 4th or a 5th round pick just because of the tight end talent. And he coming back for another season was very beneficial for him. For Theo Johnson, if he was the main target, if he was the number 1 tight end, then yeah, he would have had the stats to back it up. So the fact that he was able to be as productive as he was at Penn State while sharing time with Brenton Strange and Tyler Warren all at the same time, and then just Tyler Warren by himself, Theo Johnson had a really good season despite having to split all of the reps, all of the target share, right? But at 6'6", 260 pounds, and he ran a 4.57, second best among tight ends, but at 6'6", 260 pounds, and you glide sub 4.6, second among tight ends in terms of his 10-yard split, second among tight ends in his vertical jump, second among tight ends in his broad jump, 5th among tight ends in the 3-cone drill, and number 1 in the 20-yard shuttle. So that means he's the quickest among tight ends. NFL scouts I don't know that they're going to be able to contain themselves with the fact that you're going to get somebody with this much athletic potential. Theo Johnson has good hands. The thing I would criticize the most for Theo Johnson is probably his blocking, but an NFL team is not going to draft Theo Johnson to be a complementary tight end in the run game. They'd be stupid. They'd be foolish to do that. They're going to draft him as somebody they can stick in the slot as a mismatch. Too fast for linebackers to cover him, too big, too large for safeties, cornerbacks to try and cover him. Good luck. He's a matchup nightmare. NFL teams know that, and they're going to take a chance on him, and we'll see. I don't think he makes it past outside of the top 40 picks. It would very much surprise me if Johnson made it past the top 40 picks. I think that would be very shocking to me. Again, gonna have to see at the time of this recording, still have to wait and see what the O-line ends up doing for Adisa Isaac. Adisa Isaac had a decent NFL combine, 18th in terms of edge rushers at the 40-yard dash, 12th in terms of his 10-yard splits, 12th in terms of his vertical jump, broad jump, and 6th in terms of his broad jump. So the athleticism is there. Adisa Isaac, I think, is going to end up being a 3rd round, maybe a 4th round pick in the NFL combine shows, but he's come back such a long way. Look at the tape before you look at the athleticism, because what you don't see, he didn't participate in something like the bench press, but he's really strong. And of course, how talented he is, but also how cerebral he is, how smart he is as just a veteran. He's played a lot of college football in his time. Curtis Jacobs had an incredible day, one of the strongest, 4th in terms of his bench press. He participated in that, 7th in the 40-yard dash among linebackers, 10-yard in the 10-yard splits, 5th in his vertical jump, 6th, and in the broad jump, 4th. Curtis Jacobs, I think, is a 2nd round or a 3rd round pick and has the athleticism to go along with that. But if you're looking for winners coming away from the NFL Combine, it's easily Chop Robinson and Theo Johnson. I mean, they had an incredible day. Daquan Hardy also did too. I mean, Daquan Hardy now becomes a surefire NFL draft pick. Somebody might put him unranked or said that, he'll be signed as an undrafted free agent. 6th fastest 40-yard dash at 4.39, 5th among 10-yard splits, vertical jump, highest, best, number one, can jump up there, the vertical jump, very high in the broad jump, 14th. And then we saw what kind of tape he had in terms of the special team game as a punt returner, and will probably used in kick return and punt coverage, kick and punt coverage as well. So those are your three. Those are really your three standouts there. As Daquan Hardy now becomes possibly a 5th round pick. Chop Robinson is a solidified 1st rounder, and Theo Johnson goes into the conversation of the first 32 picks to go along with Kalen King should be making a position change. And we still have yet to see what the offensive lineman can do. But those are your initial NFL Combine takeaways. Penn State is losing a defensive tackle to the transfer portal, Jordan Van Den Berg. What does that mean? Does that hurt the depth? And it comes after winter workouts conclude with max out day. We're going to discuss the impact of that on the other side of this break. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet simply wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players, all your favorite NBA teams with things like quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and so much more. You can combine all those bets that you like into one bet, a parlay, for boosted odds and boosted winnings. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. And remember, if you're not already, become an everyday or subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams. In this final segment, we'll finish with Jordan Van Den Berg entering the transfer portal, announcing that he still has multiple years of eligibility. Always somebody that impressed with winter workouts year in and year out. Kind of that player that was a wild card, if you will, had the potential, but never really saw enough time on the football field. And the reason this move comes, people might be saying, well, why is he entering the transfer portal? He still has 2 more years. Because Penn State did 2 things here. One, they were able to retain Devon Ellies and Akeem Beamon. Those 2 defensive tackles came back when they were supposed to go into the NFL draft. And then the second part of that, Penn State recruited how many interior defensive linemen in this class of 2024? Most of them are already early enrollees. They'll still have some joining Penn State, joining the team over the course of the summer, going into the first practices. But Penn State is loaded at defensive line, if you can believe that. There's a lot of players, contenders on the depth chart. So there was no path for Jordan Vandenberg to play a whole lot this season when you have Ellies and Beamon back. You have Zane Durant still. And Zane Durant, I think, is a bona fide breakout player going into the 2024 season. And then you have all the talented freshmen coming in behind Vandenberg as well. So in his final season, hypothetically, at Penn State, he was going to lose playing time as well because Beamon would move on, Ellies would move on, right, to the NFL going into next season. But he wants to play now. And he can play now. I think Vandenberg's done his due time at Penn State, has developed very well coming into, being a Nittany Lion football player. But I think it is time for him to move on here, and he's making a decision that best suits himself. Obviously, there's more to it that we don't know about, right? It's not just a matter of, is he playing time, snap count, where he lines up on the depth chart. There might be other things included that we don't know. But looking at it from the outside and seeing this, there was no path for Jordan Vandenberg to get onto the football field as much for another season. And then the following year, and the coaches just might have had honest conversation and said, hey, we have young and up-and-coming talent that's at the defensive tackle spot that is going to push you for the next 2 seasons. So it's the older players and the younger players that were kind of making it an uncomfortable spot for Jordan Vandenberg to make a decision here later in his college football career. But that's interesting how far the defensive line position has come full circle here, right? 2022, that was the reason Penn State wasn't big in the interior. They can't stop the run, and they couldn't stop the run, but it's a whole defensive effort, right? Michigan gashed them for 400 plus yards that 2022 season. And yes, defensive tackle had somewhat of to do with it, but also the linebacker spot too. But the vague, casual concerns that defensive tackle wasn't good enough. And now defensive tackle is a position of strength for this Penn State football team. And it shows that not even going through the regiments of the spring football season and Vandenberg's making his announcement now. That's what I find the most intriguing about this, is that Vandenberg didn't wait until after spring football to try to continue to prove himself. He's saying that I am finished now and I'm ready to enter the transfer portal when it opens back up so teams can contact me as soon as possible. If it came after spring football practices, yeah, that would make a little more sense in this case. For right now in time to get a jump on this becomes all that more interesting and tells you that the defensive line room is loaded, particularly at interior defensive tackle. That'll do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. I appreciate everyone checking this episode out. This venue, this backdrop will be a little different here for about a week, but the episodes, the podcast will continue to roll out as Penn State wrestling has a busy weekend upcoming with the Big Ten tournament. Carter Starachi seems like he's going to be wrestling, but we're going to discuss that throughout this week. Penn State football finishing up at the NFL Combine. Men's basketball season winding down. Not that great finish against Minnesota, but we're going to discuss it all right here on Locked On Nittany Lions.